how could I possibly find joy or smile or laugh when my daughter is suffering, right? What does that say about me? And I think we need to flip it on its head and say just the opposite, which is she is bringing me so much joy always, whatever the situation is. And I want to give that back to her.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. So I am joined today by Jessica Fein, writer and author of Breathtaking, a memoir of family, dreams, and broken genes. She's also the host of the I Don't Know How You Do It podcast, which features people whose lives seem unimaginable and who triumph over seemingly impossible challenges. And Breathtaking is simply breathtaking, in my opinion. I absolutely devoured this book. And it shows life's weaving of loss and heartbreak alongside such joy, love, and beauty. And it's centered on the story of Jessica's brilliant and beautiful daughter, Dalia, whose personality and love for life radiates from the pages. I laughed and I cried in equal measures and could not put this book down. So I'm so excited to welcome Jessica to the show. Welcome to Death on the Daily, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, me too. So let's root ourselves into the story of you, of Dalia, of Rob, of your family. I would just love for you to share any aspect of your story that you wish to.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the book starts essentially when Rob and I meet in college. And we dated for a very long time before we got married. And so we started trying to build our family right away, the conventional way, if you will. And it turned into a 5-year journey of treatments that involved more and more people in the medical community, and our attempts became more and more creative and more people were involved. But it was not working out for us that way. And somewhere along the way, as we were getting into year 4, the beginning of year 5, our dream really changed. And we decided that our path was to adopt our children. And we never really looked at that as kind of second choice. It was just that where we were going to go totally changed in our minds. And we became so committed to the idea. So we went to Guatemala 5 times. And we adopted 3 babies, not at the same time, every couple of years. And we thought now the hard part is over and we're going to go on and live these lives that we had imagined all this time. But when our middle daughter, Dalia, was 5, she was diagnosed with an ultra rare degenerative mitochondrial disease called MERF syndrome, which stands for myoclonic epilepsy ragged red fiber. And I have to tell you, this was like so unimaginable to us in so many ways. We had suspected something was developing a little bit differently, but we never had suspected that it was something so ominous. And so when we got that diagnosis, it really didn't make any sense to us. I mean, literally, it didn't make sense to us because we're not scientists or researchers, and we didn't even know what mitochondria were. And it didn't make sense to us in the broader sense either. I mean, we had this just perfect little girl, and to think that she was harboring this insidious disease inside of her, it was really hard to reconcile. Nonetheless, I decided, I will personally cure this disease that no brilliant researcher or scientist has been able to cure. But, as the parents were accustomed to being like, well, kiss the boo-boo, we'll put on the Band-Aid, we'll make it all better. And so I really set about trying to find a study, researchers, scouring all over the world to be able to figure this out. And Dalia's disease kept progressing, and I did not find this fantastical cure that I had in my mind that I was going to find, that brilliant people who study this aren't able to find. And when Dalia was 9, we were on a family vacation in Florida. We live outside of Boston in the US, and she caught a cold. And when you have any, many kinds of diseases, catching a cold is not a simple thing. And that cold landed us in the hospital, and it turned into pneumonia, and Dalia became intubated. So therein started a bit of an odyssey of finding our way back to Boston and landing in the hospital, where we stayed for 3 months. And she became very, very ill at that time. So when we left the hospital 3 months later, she had a tracheotomy. And for people who don't know, that's when you have a little hole in the neck with a tube and you breathe that way rather than breathing the conventional way. And she was attached to a ventilator that would facilitate her breathing. And she had lost her ability to walk and to talk and to eat. She now had a feeding tube. So that's when our lives really, really changed in every imaginable way. And that was from when she was 9 to when she was 17. Dalia died 1 week after her 17th birthday.
Yeah. Oh, I was just connecting into Dalia, into your beautiful, beautiful daughter, and obviously such a tragedy, and obviously such a journey as well to that
Yeah, I
point.
mean, what was really interesting is how much all of our lives changed, and also how much I personally changed in the 8 years between when we came home from the hospital at age 9 for Dalia until she was 17. Because at that point, she was what's called an eyes-on patient, meaning myself or my husband or a nurse trained specifically in her care had to have our eyes on her 24/7. And there was so much machinery and there were so many people coming in and out of our house. I mean, it was kind of like we had set up a little intensive care unit in our house. And yet there was Dalia, like wanting to be a kid and wanting to go and have fun and play and do what she could. And we really wanted to give her as typical a childhood, as glorious a childhood as we possibly could. And so I went from thinking I was going to personally cure this disease to changing what it was I was trying to solve, knowing I couldn't solve that. What I could solve was, how do I make each day for Dalia the very best it can be? And it took a while for me to get there mentally, to be able to make that shift. But my husband was there right from the start. And so I learned a lot watching him. And it did help to have two siblings around. Dalia was the middle, and her siblings, first of all, just wanted to play with her. And also, all three of them just wanted to be kids. So we set about creating a life that would have as much joy and frivolity in it as possible in what was the heaviest circumstances imaginable.
Yes, that weaving of joy into the heaviest and most difficult of circumstances, that really, really shines through. And I would love to root into that, actually, to just hear anything around what were those joys, what were they rooted in? Because what came through for me was, actually, there was one moment, and it was you and Dalia. I think it might have been just after her diagnosis, and you were was it in the shower, and you accidentally knocked the water, and
Yes.
you just were both, she was crying, wasn't she?
God, she would just laugh. So, we would try so hard to do something, and we would mess up. I'll never forget, even when we were in the hospital one time, Rob, my husband, I don't know, he kind of like tripped over something and fell. And she thought this was the funniest thing she had ever seen, so of course he then had to repeat it like 10 times, but I think all along what we learned was, for us, given her very precarious medical situation, even doing something simple, there was a victory in that, right? So, what seems like a simple outing for us, it was a victory. Going to the movies, for example. She loved the movies. I love the movies, but it's not so easy anymore. Or getting her nails done, finding a place despite the fact that her hands were tremoring because she had myoclonus, which is a shaking of different body parts, in her case, her hands, or that we needed to wheelchair in. But okay, that wasn't going to stop us, and And for all of this, it was following her lead. And this is what she wanted. And she wanted to be happy and be joyful. And she wasn't bitter and angry. And so I felt like if she's not, I can't be. I'm
Hmm.
following her lead. And boy, what an amazing lead it was, and it's taught me so much every day, even now, 2 years later.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I love that. Following Dalia's lead.
I have a story about that actually, which I tell a little bit in the book, but Dalia couldn't eat after we got out of the hospital orally. She was fed entirely through a feeding tube. And so we decided we weren't going to expose her to food because we thought that would be just so upsetting. So during dinner, one of us would eat with the other two kids, and one of us would be in a different room with Dahlia. Or, for example, when we went to the movies, none of us would have popcorn because she couldn't have popcorn. And then ultimately, she ends up changing schools. She has to leave the public school system, which was a big, big fight for us. And we wanted to keep her in the public school system, but they didn't believe they could keep her safe. So she was going to be sent to a special school that really knows how to keep children with complex medical situations safe. It's on the grounds of a hospital. And when I got the schedule for the first day, it said cooking. And absolutely freaked out. There's no way we're going to expose Dahlia to cooking class. She can't eat. The school's supposed to know better. This whole thing. I was going a mile a minute, but decided we'd give it one shot in terms of the cooking class. Well, that day, she came home from school and she reached into her backpack and she had 4 individually wrapped cookies, one for me and one for Rob and one for each of her siblings. And she handed them to us with such a huge smile and so much pride. And then the teacher emailed me to talk about the day and said her favorite part was the cooking, getting in with the dough and being able to really, be messy and bake these cookies. And it was like this realization that we were shutting Dahlia out from one of the great joys in life, being part of the whole cooking and food experience.
Mhm.
Only a little piece of it is about the eating, so that was such a good example of following her lead. And after that, we all had dinner together every single solitary night for the next, whatever, 6 years up until the night before she died. I mean, we always were together around food. We got her a chef hat. She became the little chef, and she would always help. But I bring that story up because it was really an example of us needing to, take a step back and not think about what we were going to do to protect her. In our, minds, we were doing the best by keeping the food separate, but following her lead. She wanted to be part of it. And so she taught us a lot in that respect.
Oh, that's beautiful around following her lead, meeting her where she is and meeting her in
Exactly.
her joy as well. I
Yes.
love that. That's so beautiful. And those stories, I when I read the story around those cookies, I was there with you in
Yeah.
in her joy. When I talk about Dahlia, I knew I'd be beaming in this conversation, but
I
these
love
stories are
that.
literally bringing such a smile because of the beautiful stories that you tell. And one thing as well that really resonated with me was when you were given the advice by a doctor that if you listen closely, that Dahlia would tell you what she needed. So I also just wanted to just see if there's anything you wish to share in this space about how that was for you, because I can understand that must be really challenging as a mother, and in a lot of ways actually go against, I suppose, that mother, to your point, that motherly instinct of I'm going to solve this for you, I'm going to cure this. So yeah, tell
Yes.
me a little bit more.
Absolutely. And I will say, boy, that was another great lesson that I continue to think about often with my other
Mm.
kids who do not have medical challenges. But what happened on that particular evening is Dahlia was going into respiratory failure. We were in the hospital and they had to run some urgent tests to see whether she'd need to be intubated yet again. And we were waiting for the test results. And a very young doctor, she was a student, she and I were sitting by Dahlia's bed, and I just was saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know if we should do this, that, the other thing, going a mile a minute. And she just looked at me and she said, Dahlia's going to tell you what she needs. And I didn't understand what she meant at first. I was like, okay, Dahlia is like sedated. Dahlia, I need to figure this out. She's just 9. I need to figure it out for her. And she said, Dahlia will tell you what she needs. And sure enough, they came back with the test results and she did need to be intubated again. Dalia's body was telling us, this is what I need. But we really kept that in our minds for the next, for the rest of the journey in terms of her physical symptoms, not as, oh, this thing is, this horrible, horrible symptom, which it was, but rather as an indication, she's telling us what she needs now, whether that's she needs more oxygen, she needs this medication, she needs fresh air, whatever it was. But the other thing that was really interesting is with the other kids, we started to look at their behaviors, some of which were challenging over the years, as any kids are, and some that were particularly challenging given what was going on in the house, as telling us what they needed. So instead of being, why are you doing that, whatever that we might do because we're frustrated with our kids, really looking at that and saying they're telling us what they need. And I still try to do that.
Wow. That is so, I think that's so profound for all of us in all of our life. Yeah. What are our kids? What are our family members or whoever? What are they telling us that they need? Because actually you've really connected me into, because I often talk about meeting people where they are, and particularly those who are sort of on really difficult paths, but actually that's that layer deeper of it, of meet someone where they are and really, really listen and watch for what they really need, what they really want. I think that's so beautiful. And obviously that's the ripple effect, obviously that doctor has had through those words, but also through Dalia and through that experience.
Yeah, I love the idea of the ripple effect, because here was this individual who, in the intensive care unit, the doctors and the staff are changing all the time. You get to know some of them, the repeats, but this woman, I don't know what her name was. She was just kind of there that night, and probably had no idea what a profound effect her words were having on me. And then I've been able to share them, and maybe somebody else will get something out of it. And so it really is amazing to think about how a midnight conversation, as this was, could end up having years and years later. I mean, that was in 2014, that conversation.
Wow, that is some ripple effect that will have flowed out through your writing, through the book.
I wonder if she would ever, if that happen upon the book, and recognize herself.
Oh yeah, I wonder, or if she'll just not have any idea. But I think that's really powerful as well. That her holding space for you in that moment, where she noticed as well in you, trying that, which is totally understandable. That motherly instinct of what can I do now, trying to sort of, and just being able to say, hang on a minute, let's just listen. I think that's really, really beautiful. It's something I'm definitely going to be taking that one forwards as well, extending that ripple effect.
Right.
And I'd love to hear as well for you, because I think you've just shared so profoundly in sort of a couple of spaces of, really, really listening, as well as on that side of connecting into joy and the simple joys, including in the most painful of moments. So I wondered, is there, if there's any listeners who are navigating really challenging, perhaps really painful paths, is there any words of advice that you would share for them as to how they could navigate that with that connection?
Definitely. I mean, I would say, first of all, when we're going through something, especially when what we're going through is having to do with a loved one, we tend to feel guilty. We tend to put guilt trips on ourselves for so many things. And one of them, I think, is this idea of, how could I possibly find joy or smile or laugh when my daughter is suffering, right? What does that say about me? And I think we need to flip it on its head and say just the opposite, which is, she is bringing me so much joy always, whatever the situation is. And I want to give that back to her. Right. And I feel like it, especially again with the other kids, it was a modeling for them. And I wasn't conscious of doing this, and they did it for me way more than I did it for them. But that this is our situation. And right. And so it was all about the and it was another real learning for me, because I definitely would have thought, if you are going through something so painful, so scary, so horrible, there's no room for joy. And what I learned was, oh no, joy is going to be right there. If you just look for it or open your arms or invite it in, it wants to be there, right? It's going to like shoulder its way in and be like, here I am. You just have to be willing to welcome it. And sometimes that means looking for things that might be a joyous moment that you wouldn't have recognized before. And sometimes it means being deliberate in creating it. It means, so one afternoon it was like a snowy day and we're home and it's just everything's feeling a little dreary. So let's throw on It's Nobody's Birthday Party. We did that. Dalia loved parties, so it's introducing that joy, inviting that joy. I'll never forget one night. So my husband Rob and I, we would try to go on these date nights a lot because we needed to have a little bit of time away to connect with each other. But it was a big thing to do because we'd need to have two caregivers at home if we weren't home, and it was complicated. And one night we were meant to go out and it ended up falling through, but a caregiver called out. And I'll never forget that our other two kids, and they were little itty bitty at the time, prepared a dinner for us and set up a table at the foot of Dalia's bed. And, she was home, but she was in a hospital bed and there were a lot of machinery and they waited on us. And we had this like little fancy dinner at the end of her bed. She was asleep, but we needed to be in the room because, as I said, she was eyes on. And, we had a little candlelight, but there was also the glow of the machines and the beeps of the machines. But just this idea that we were bringing this, some beauty into that environment. And so, not to sound Pollyanna, I mean, it's absolutely horrific. And there was not only a way to invite beauty in, but really an imperative to do so, to create a little corner of beauty, because this was her life. And now I can look back on those memories and have some really beautiful, beautiful memories that continue to nourish me.
Creating that corner of beauty, that really shone through as a lesson. It was towards the end of your book. And actually, I remember it was it Dalia's bat mitzvah, and you looked up to the ceiling of the synagogue.
Yes.
And that sort of the weaving together and just that looking at the roof.
And I will tell you that originally that's where the book ended, because I wrote this book while Dalia was alive. And I had an agent and sold the book. Dalia was alive and it was ending at that very, very joyous scene. And then, of course, Dalia died and I added the epilogue. But this book was never meant to be a book about Dalia's death. This is a book about Dalia's life.
Yes. I love that. And I think that's what really shone through. And actually, it really reached such a joyous crescendo at her bat mitzvah with their dancing. And I just thought it was absolutely beautiful, that storytelling. And it's interesting that you say that, actually, because I can really see that was the story arc. And actually then there's the epilogue at the end, which really, really honors her. But it's very much, and I think that is, for me, that's when we are faced with our death or the death of someone that we love. For me, it's around that really connecting us into life. When I trained to become a death doula, that was one of the first things they taught us, is that actually until they take their last breath, they are very much alive. Like where I studied is an institute called Living Well, Dying Well. And it's very much about that. You are living until that last breath and making sure that all of our practice is rooted in that. And that's what really, really shone through. And I love that around creating those moments of beauty. And obviously then with your kids, and actually how they played such a part in really cultivating those moments of beauty and joy along the way.
And I'll say, we learned a lot from some of the different caregivers who came in. And I know that with being a death doula and the studies, that you understand so much more than perhaps, just an average person who's not as comfortable with it. And we had one nurse who was just so amazing, who had spent many years working in hospice. And she really taught us a lot, not even in a trying to be an instructor kind of way, but just allowing us to observe the beautiful interactions she had with Dalia and with our other kids. And I feel like I learned so much from her. And we were so different. I mean, she was just like really quiet and really, patient. And I'm like, million miles a minute and like spinning around. And so sometimes, our styles would be a little bit off-putting to each other. And yet I think we both learned from each other and brought something to the experience that complemented each other.
Oh wow, that's so beautiful. And again, the ripple effect that others
Yeah.
and others experience as well when we have lived experience of, navigating difficult situations as well. That's where we're in our presence, and we can also learn from other people as well, no matter what position we're
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
love that. And I would love as well, you mentioned Rob and
Yes.
your date nights. I would love to connect it because your relationship is just, I mean, it's just incredible. I love how you kind of know each other's strengths and that sort of true partnership, true team as you navigated this together. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of, yeah, how did you navigate both, I suppose,
Yes.
on the practical and the emotional side?
Well, I will tell you that the most consistent piece of feedback I got from the early readers of this book who didn't know us, right? So,
Mhm.
editors, etc. The most consistent piece of feedback I received was, well, you've made Rob into a saint. Surely nobody's that perfect. And then I would tell my friends, and they were like, well, that's Rob. But so I did have to go in and add some more texture to his character. And, I told him, I was like, I've got to make you into a cad because we needed to have some more texture. So there are a couple of scenes that weren't in there originally.
Mhm.
But I think a few things. I think, first of all, we did really complement each other. And, 80 something percent of couples who have a child with a disability split up. And that's not even medically complicated. That's just a disability. It's very hard for couples to navigate this and stay intact. It's just astonishing, the statistics. I think for us, there were a number of things. First of all, again, our skill set really complemented each other, and we were both fully in it. It was never one of us more than the other. Rob was a better hands on medical caregiver than I was. And it wasn't either of our professions. I mean, he's a teacher, but he just was excellent at that. And he had such a beautiful connection with Dalia. And everybody was kind of blown away by it, especially, I think, because they're not accustomed to the dad being the one that's very much the hands on caregiver. And I was very good at arranging things, scheduling things, figuring out, there was a lot of complexity, and I took care of kind of the logistical side of things. So I think we really had great respect for what the other was bringing to the table. And I think the fact that we were both so in it, we never, ever had a conversation, not once, why aren't you doing more? Nothing like that. And we gave each other space, literally and figuratively. So literally, we each had a night off during the week. And I would recommend this to anybody. I mean, we got this idea from a couple we knew who had one child who was healthy. And they said, we give each other a night off during the week so that we can just, do our own thing. And we were like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Why didn't we ever think of that? And so Tuesday nights became, one of us, had that night, and one of us had Thursday night. And that was a night when we could just do whatever we wanted outside of the house, and giving each other that space, that time. It doesn't sound like a big deal. I promise you it was a huge deal. And then figuratively giving each other space, because it was so emotionally heavy, being able not to just, if we were in a bad place, go and dump on the other one. I mean, we were the only people who could fully understand what the other was going through. And yet, if one of us is in a good place and the other one comes in and starts dumping, that's going to just bring the other one down. So instead, we'd ask, like, is this an okay time? I'd love to share with you, I'm struggling. And then maybe it was, what, I hear you, but like, can we just do that in a little bit? Or, yeah, bring it on. But I think just pausing, and instead of just, going in a mile a minute, which again is like my comfort zone, is the mile a minute place, but really kind of trying to slow down and say, okay, like, let's make sure that this is an okay time, because otherwise we could have just constantly been bringing each other down. And instead we were really trying to lift the other one up.
Wow, I love that. Some really powerful lessons. And I think, as well for all of us in relationships to be bringing in, as well as obviously during the most challenging times. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I would now love to root
I was just going to say,
into.
I mean, there was probably part of it was just luck. I was just lucky that, we were lucky that the other one was, you know, some of it I think is just, we were a good fit, and we had been through a lot together by then.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I really resonate with that as well with my partner Jordan, and when I think of everything that we went through and losing our
Yeah,
daughter, and actually how we navigated that, and as well it just we sort of just slotted into those different roles and
yeah,
understanding those strengths. So I think sometimes it does just flow like that.
right.
And you can look back. I'm feeling when I'm writing my book I might have similar feedback and need to
I
work
can't
out.
wait for your book.
Thank you. Um, and I would love as well to give some space to all of the siblings, obviously Dalia as well as Jojo and Theo. So tell me about the relationship of these siblings, because it really, I mean, for me, it comes through in the book. It's absolutely beautiful, and you can see just that connection, and that just at different points, that protection and just
Yes.
everything, the love that shines through.
I was just going to say it became so, so important because as Dahlia's disease progressed, she had less interaction with people outside of the house. And then, of course, it was COVID. So the fact that there were these two kids, she's smack dab in the middle, that were here all the time and that were so comfortable with her. I mean, a lot of people became very uncomfortable, kids and adults, because she was clearly getting sicker. Her disease was affecting different parts of her body, ultimately her brain. And so people are uncomfortable. But the kids weren't, her siblings. I mean, so Theo, who's 2 years younger than Dahlia, I mean, he would just curl up in bed right next to her. I mean, there was a lot of machinery and tubes and everything else. He just moved the tubes and curl up and, swat her with her stuffed animal and read to her and do all this stuff, and just was such a well, maybe it was even a little bit holier than a normal sibling relationship, because there was, it was just so different. But he just was so comfortable and very physical. And then Jojo, who was older, became such a huge help to me in terms of the medical caregiving. Dalia, for the last few years, required two people to move her. It was called a two-person lift. And Jojo was way stronger than I am. And I couldn't do it without Jojo. And then, really started to learn about some of the medical care, which was probably not something when I talk about this now, I'm like, I probably should be keeping that to ourselves, because maybe it wasn't okay that we were having the kids do some of that stuff, but they learned and they were privy to things that most people, let alone most kids, are not privy to. And I do think it shaped them. I do think that they became so much more inclusive and understanding and compassionate. And maybe they would have been that way anyway, who knows? But Dalia really had a huge impact. And I know that Dalia continues to inspire them daily. And I know that because they tell me.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That sibling relationship
Yeah.
continues on with Dalia, very much there. And also you wrote that you learned that being whole for your family meant letting them see that you were broken. And actually there's
Yeah.
a really profound moment, wasn't it? I think it was with Theo.
Actually, it was JoJo, but I'm so glad you brought that up because, when people say to me, do you have any regrets? I don't regret a thing about how we cared for Dalia. I don't regret anything having to do with Dalia. I am so grateful. But I do have one huge regret, and it had to do with something JoJo pointed out to me. And I love to talk about this because I wish I had heard this before, because I think it would have changed how I approached things. And that was pretty early on. My husband and I decided, without having a conversation, it was just kind of our innate feeling that what we were going to do is we were going to shoulder as much of this trauma for our kids as we could. I mean, I even realize how ludicrous it sounds saying it out loud, but we felt like there was so much heaviness. We just didn't want them to carry anything more. So we put on a really, kind of impenetrable, which but I mean, unable to be penetrated. I can't really say the word, strong front. And one night, Jojo came to us, just really had broken down and said, there's something wrong with me, and was sobbing and said, I'm so scared and I'm so angry. And I pray and I pray and I pray, and Dahlia's not getting better. What's wrong with me? You guys seem fine. And it was such an aha moment of, oh my God, here we were trying to make it seem like we've got this. And we didn't have it at all. We didn't have it at all. We were fumbling and trying to figure it out every day. And we hadn't shown that to the kids. And so they thought that something must be wrong with them. And it made me realize, oh my God, we need to show them that this is hard and that this is, we're stressed and scared and angry too, so that they can understand in this situation and in any situation that those feelings are completely normal, and we can, move on, and we can integrate them and move on in a successful way. So I was grateful that Jojo pointed it out to me, though I wish it hadn't had to get to that point.
Yeah. And I think, just for me sitting here and I'm connecting into my own parents, I think that's such an instinct of so many parents, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of we can't show this. We don't want to, upset our children. This is really challenging. But
Yeah.
actually, what really shone through is that the resilience that children have, and the resilience of all of your three, and actually
Yeah.
just how you went on that journey, and with that conversation with Jojo, that then just opened that up. I think you mentioned around that taking that, was it your armor off? I think you shared
Yes.
in the book, which
Yeah.
I think was just, is so profound as well. For me, what's really resonated is just the presence that you've navigated all of these different moments to be able to really sort of sit with, what is it, in that conversation, something that's, I can imagine very emotionally difficult to sort of face into, but to be able to say, okay, I need to now take that armor off and show it
Yes.
all.
Yeah. And it's much more comfortable for me to keep that armor on,
Mm,
but
yeah.
that wasn't serving them in any way.
Hmm. To be honest, I think that is a broader lesson for us as a culture and as a society. Even if I think about when I was young, even anyone's ill in the I remember my brother going into hospital, and it was very much, oh, you're just going to go play with him. Nothing ever explained. And it's actually sort of later in life that's come out in certain different therapy sessions where these memories have come back of sort of paramedics sprinting up the stairs to him, and me as a child not knowing something's happening, but not having any concept of what, is he in danger? Everyone's acting like it's normal. So that really, really resonated with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we think we're doing the best thing, but
Yeah.
I wish I had been clued into that a little earlier.
Hmm. Yeah, those really, really powerful, powerful lessons. And as we sort of come towards the close of our
Mm.
conversation, I would love as well to hear from you. So if you were to write a note to yourself at the time of Dahlia's diagnosis, what would you share with that past version of yourself?
I love that question. And I think what I would share with myself is, you are capable of more than you think. Because no way I would have raised my hand for this. No way I would have signed up for it. I did not think that this was something I could handle. And if future me could have told me back then, you got this. This is going to be the hardest thing you're going to go through and the scariest thing you're going to go through, but you can do it. I think it would have helped, because there was such a huge question mark, kind of walking alongside me all along. Can I do this? And I think that, we don't know until we're put in the situation. And then we do. We do, because what other choice do we have? And so we need to think about, and it would be an interesting exercise, I suppose, sometimes in those moments, to think, okay, what might, me 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road say to me now? And just knowing that, you know, we can do what is put in front of us.
I love that. And what a powerful practice as well to be able to connect into that
Yeah.
future self. I actually sometimes do it in my coaching session when my clients will go into meditation, and I'll bring in their 80-year-old future
I
version
love
of
that.
themselves. And the
Oh,
messages are always so profound. And that wisdom
yeah.
is within us. I think as humans, we know the depths of our resilience, but obviously if we haven't been in those situations, there's almost, our mind can't contextualize the journey
Yeah,
that we're about to go on.
exactly.
Yeah. As we come to into the closing, in Death in the Daily, we understand that everything in life is impermanent, including these conversations. But before we close out, I would really, really love to root into Dalia and that ripple effect, that legacy that she created in her life. So I'd really love to actually root into the ripple effect. What's coming through for me is the ripple effect that she had in her life, which really does radiate out, it ripples out from your book, but also into the ripple effect now as she lives on through you and all of your work.
Yeah, and I feel like the work that I'm doing now gives me an excuse to talk about her, which I love to do. And you know that because we're so awkward and uncomfortable around grievers, people don't want to talk about the person who's gone because they don't want to remind the griever, right? As though we've forgotten. And we want to be able to talk about our people and tell our stories. And so I love having conversations like this because I feel like I want people to get to know Dalia. I mean, I feel bad for the whole world that doesn't get to know her now, right? But this is a way to be able to share stories. And so that's very meaningful for me and her joy and her sweetness and kindness.
I love that. I wish I could have met Dalia. Honestly, I can feel that joy, that sweetness, that kindness, that love. And just it is amazing as well when, reading the book around just everyone who she met, the fact that, in the hospitals and everywhere, everyone, she's a magnet.
She was a magnet. And I will tell you, I still will get letters from people or run into somebody who will say, I was her speech therapist for a week in kindergarten or whatever, and I still think about her. So,
Wow.
She was magic.
Oh my goodness. Magic Dalia. Absolutely, absolutely love that. And before we close out as well, Jessica, would love for you to share any final words, as well as where can our listeners connect with you and find out about Breathtaking?
Yes. So first of all, please connect with me. I'm on social, whether that's through Instagram or Facebook. And I just started a Substack too called Fine by Me. But the hub for everything that I'm doing is on my website, which is jessicafeinstories.com. And of course, that's Jessica Fein, Fein. And then, yes, please, if people want to hear the audiobook or the ebook or read it, hold it in their hands, it's available in all the ways and all the places. And then I have my podcast, as you mentioned at the beginning. I don't know how you do it. So, but, I'd love to connect with readers. There's nothing, or listeners, or just people. So, just connecting with me in any of these ways, that'll be great.
Amazing. I love that. I will put all of the links in the show notes. And yeah, Breathtaking, I did have a look actually. I saw it was on Spotify. So I think I'm definitely going to give it a second listen. So next time it's going to be the audiobook version. I was scribbling down loads of lessons in living that have come from your sweet Dalia. So
I love that.
Oh, well, Jessica, I am so grateful to you. I'm so grateful to Dalia and her spirit in this conversation. Thank you so, so much for joining me on Death on the Daily.
Thank you so much for having me.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside, and we'll never, never make it, and we'll never, never break.